Tessa's vision blurred at the edges, the gilded ballroom tilting like a ship in a storm. She'd made a mistake coming here. A terrible, desperate mistake. As the floor rushed up to meet her, she had no idea that the hands about to catch her would change everything. The mating ball sprawled before her in a haze of silk and candlelight, unmated wolves from every corner of the realm, dressed in their finest, dancing and laughing and drinking expensive wine. 3 days. That's how long it had been since she'd eaten anything more than the heel of stale bread she'd found behind the miller's shop. She shouldn't be here. The invitation had been a clerical error, obviously. Some bureaucrat's mistake, sending a summons to the daughter of a dead merchant rather than crossing her name off the registry. But when the heavy parchment had arrived at the boarding house where she scrubbed floors for rent, Tessa had stared at the gold-embossed words and made a choice born of pure desperation. Mating ball promised a feast, tables laden with food, servants circulating with trays of delicacies, wine flowing like water. She could slip in, eat enough to sustain herself for a week, and slip out before anyone noticed she didn't belong. Except she'd severely underestimated how weak she'd become. The room spun again, and Tessa grabbed for the nearest column, her fingers sliding against cool marble. Her borrowed dress, a faded blue thing that had belonged to her mother, let out at the seams and carefully mended, suddenly felt too tight across her ribs. When had breathing become so difficult? She needed to leave, before she collapsed in front of all these beautiful, well-fed people and became tomorrow's scandal. Tessa turned toward the exit, but her legs had other ideas. As the floor rushed up to meet her, she had only one absurd thought: way to survive starvation for 2 years just to collapse the one night there's actually food. But the impact never came. Instead of cold marble, she fell into warmth, into strength, into arms that caught her like she weighed nothing at all, cradling her against a chest that smelled of pine smoke and winter storms. "I've got you," a voice said above her. Deep, rough-edged, commanding. The kind of voice that made her wolf, dormant and half-starved as it was, stir for the first time in months. Tessa forced her eyes open and found herself staring into a face that stole what little breath she had left. Sharp jaw, dark blue eyes, ocean deep and unreadable, though something flickered in their depths, like he'd been waiting for her. Hair the color of burnt oak, slightly too long, falling across a forehead creased with worry, and a presence that made every wolf in the room turn and bow their heads in instinctive submission. Oh no, Tessa thought distantly. Oh no, no, no. The Alpha King had just caught her in his arms. "Your Majesty, I can take her," someone said, but Tom silenced them with a look. No. The single word carried absolute authority. His arms tightened around her, and Tessa felt the strangest thing: safety. Despite everything, the humiliation, the terror, the weakness singing through her bones, she felt safe. "Can you walk?" he asked, and she realized he was speaking only to her now, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. Tessa tried to nod, but the movement made her vision swim again. "I just need a moment. You need food." He'd assessed her in seconds, the hollow of her cheeks, the way her collarbones jutted sharp beneath pale skin, the tremor in her hands. "When did you last eat?" The concern in his voice made something in her chest crack. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked her that. "I'm fine," she lied, because that's what she'd been telling herself for 2 years. "If you'll just put me down—" "Not a chance." He shifted her weight, one arm beneath her knees, the other supporting her back, and started walking. Guests stepped aside, their whispers following, in his wake. Tessa's mind screamed at her to protest, to salvage some dignity, but her body had other priorities. She was so tired, so hungry. So she let her head rest against his shoulder and told herself it was just until the dizziness passed. Before we continue, please take a second to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this. Tom carried her through a side door, down a corridor lined with tapestries, and into a small chamber that looked like a private dining room. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a table was set with enough food to feed 10 people. He set her down in a chair with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size, then immediately began loading a plate. Bread, cheese, sliced meat, roasted vegetables, fruit that gleamed like jewels in the firelight. "Eat," he said, setting the plate before her. "Slowly. Your stomach won't handle much at first." Tessa stared at the food, her throat tightening. "I can't. This is yours." "It's yours now." He poured water into a glass, set it beside the plate. "Please." Tessa picked up a piece of bread with shaking hands and took a small bite. The taste exploded across her tongue. Fresh bread, still warm, with butter melting into its soft interior. She had to close her eyes against the wave of emotion that crashed over her. When she opened them again, Tom was sitting across from her, watching with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but didn't. "More," he said quietly when she paused. "Take your time, but keep eating." She did. Small bites, careful, letting each one settle before taking the next. He didn't speak, didn't rush her, just sat there like he had all the time in the world to watch a stranger eat his food. After a while, the acute desperation faded, replaced by a different kind of awareness. Of him. Of the way the firelight caught in his dark eyes, the breadth of his shoulders beneath his formal jacket, the way his hands rested on the table. Large, scarred, capable. "Thank you," she said finally. "For this. For not what? Not calling the guards, not having me thrown out." She set down the piece of cheese she'd been holding. "I wasn't actually invited. The summons was a mistake." "I know." Tessa's head snapped up. "You do?" "I checked the registry after I saw you in the ballroom. Your name shouldn't have been on it." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "So why did you come?" She should lie, but something about the way he was looking at her, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity, made the truth spill out. "I was hungry," she said simply. "I thought I could slip in, eat something, and leave. I didn't expect to." She gestured vaguely at herself. "How long have you been starving?" The question hung between them, brutal and honest. Most people danced around it, called it lean times or difficult circumstances. But Tom didn't flinch from the reality of it. 2 years, Tessa said, since my father died. He gambled away everything we had before the fever took him. The debts came after, and the creditors took the house, the shop, everything. I've been working where I can, but it's never quite enough. Tom's jaw tightened. "You have no family?" "None that claimed me after the debts came to light. Turns out blood isn't as thick as gold." He was silent for a long moment, and Tessa braced herself for pity, for the careful distance people put between themselves and misfortune, like poverty, might be contagious. Instead, he reached across the table and took her hand. The contact sent a shock through her system, like every nerve in her body had suddenly woken up. Her wolf, silent for so long, surged to the surface with a force that stole her breath. Tom's eyes darkened, his grip tightening. She knew he felt it too. "What's your name?" he asked, his thumb tracing a slow circle on the back of her hand. "Tessa." "Tessa." He said it like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "I'm Tom." "I know who you are, Your Majesty." "Just Tom." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "You should stay, Tessa. I can't, not forever, but stay for the next few days. Let me make sure you're fed, rested, safe. His grip tightened on her hand. Please. There was that word again, and beneath it, something that sounded almost like desperation. Tessa looked at their joined hands, at the scars she could see along his wrist disappearing beneath his sleeve, at the way he held her like she might disappear if he let go. Why? She asked carefully. Why do you care what happens to me? Tom's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features before he locked it down. I know what it's like to be hungry for something you can't have, and because... He trailed off, then seemed to make a decision. Because the moment I caught you, something in me woke up that's been sleeping for a very long time. The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. What do you mean? His jaw worked for a moment, and she watched him wrestle with whatever he wanted to say. Ask me again when you've had a full night's sleep and more than one meal. You drive a hard bargain, she said with a faint smile. I'll stay 3 days, but then I go back to my life. He smiled, but his ocean blue eyes held a sadness that tugged at her heart. 3 days it is. The room Tom led her to was larger than any place she'd ever lived. A bed piled with furs dominated one wall, and a fire had already been lit in the hearth. Through the window, she could see the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. There are clothes in the wardrobe, Tom said from the doorway, and someone will bring hot water for a bath shortly. If you need anything at all, pull that cord and someone will come. Tessa turned to face him, suddenly aware of how alone they were, how close he was standing, how easy it would be to close the distance between them. Thank you, Tom. For all of this, don't thank me yet. There was something dark in his voice, something weighted. You might regret saying yes. Why would I regret it? He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw a war happening behind his eyes. Finally, he just shook his head. Get some rest, Tessa. We'll talk more tomorrow. He left before she could press further, closing the door quietly behind him. Tessa stood in the center of the room, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning, she'd woken up in a boarding house with nothing but the clothes on her back and 3 coppers to her name. Now she was standing in a palace, with a full stomach for the first time in months, with a king who looked at her like she was something special. It didn't make sense. The hot water arrived, carried by 2 servants who filled a copper tub without meeting her eyes. When they left, Tessa stripped off her mother's dress and sank into the bath with a sigh that came from her bones. The heat seeped into her muscles, easing aches she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten they weren't normal. She scrubbed herself clean with soap that smelled of lavender, washed her hair until it felt like silk again instead of straw. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a robe softer than anything she'd ever touched, she found food waiting on a small table by the fire. Nothing elaborate, just bread, butter, honey, and tea. But it was there, like Tom had known she'd be hungry again. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, then crawled into the bed and let herself sink into furs that felt like clouds. For the first time in 2 years, Tessa fell asleep without hunger gnawing at her insides. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of breakfast. Sitting up, she found another tray on the table. Eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, bread still warm from the ovens. And a note, written in a strong, angular hand. Eat. I'll come by mid-morning. Tessa's chest did something complicated at the sight of that single-letter signature, like they were already familiar enough for shorthand, like this was normal. She ate everything on the tray, then dressed in one of the simple dresses she found in the wardrobe, deep green wool that fit surprisingly well. The knock came precisely at mid-morning. Tom filled the doorway, dressed more casually than last night in dark trousers and a linen shirt. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently bathed, and Tessa caught herself staring at the hollow of his throat where his pulse beat steady and strong before she forced herself to look away. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I have in years." "Good." He offered his arm. "Walk with me?" They walked through the castle, Tom pointing out various rooms and corridors, but Tessa barely heard him. She was too aware of his presence beside her, the way his arm felt beneath her hand, the occasional brush of his shoulder against hers. They ended up in a garden tucked behind the main keep, where roses bloomed despite the cold. Tom led her to a bench overlooking a fountain, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, "about why I asked you to stay." Tessa's stomach tightened. Here it was, the catch, the reason this was too good to be true. "I'm listening." Tom stared at the fountain, his jaw working like he was trying to find the right words. "A year ago, I led our forces against the Blackwater Pack. We won, but—" He paused, his hand flexing like he was remembering pain. "I was injured, badly, and I haven't been the same since." "What kind of injury?" "The kind that doesn't heal." His voice was flat. "The kind that makes people question whether I'm fit to rule." Tessa waited, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. When he didn't continue, she asked, "And what does that have to do with me?" Tom finally looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "When I caught you last night, something changed. I felt—" He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. "Better, clearer, like something that's been wrong for a year suddenly clicked into place." Tessa stared at him, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. "You want me to stay because I'm some kind of cure?" "No." The word came out fierce. He turned on the bench to face her fully. "I want you to stay because when I caught you, I felt something I've never felt before, and I need to understand what it means." His hand found hers. "I spent all night trying to find the right words for this, rehearsing different ways to ask without sounding desperate or manipulative." A rueful smile crossed his face. "Clearly, I'm not doing very well." "You're doing fine," Tessa said quietly, and meant it. The honesty in his voice did something to her, cracked open a place she'd kept carefully locked for years. She'd learned not to trust pretty words from powerful men, learned that kindness always came with a price. But Tom felt different. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, drawn to him in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. She could feel the pull between them pulsing. Part of her wanted to lean into it, to close the small distance separating them on the bench and see if his mouth was as soft as it looked. "So, how do you want to spend our time?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom's thumb traced a slow circle on the back of her hand, and she felt that touch everywhere. "Let me court you properly," he said. "Feed you everything you've been denied. Show you that not everyone who offers help wants something in return." His eyes held hers. "And hope like hell you choose to stay." The vulnerability in his eyes undid her. This wasn't a king making demands. This was a man, wounded, wary, hoping, asking for a chance. Her wolf surged forward, and for once Tessa didn't fight it. She leaned in, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her palm. Tom went very still. His eyes darkened, dropping to her mouth, and she felt the tension coil between them like a living thing. "Tessa," he said, her name rough in his throat. A warning, or maybe a plea. She was close enough to feel his breath on her lips, close enough to catch the scent of pine smoke and winter storms that clung to his skin, close enough that closing the distance would be easy, natural even. But something held her back. Not fear, exactly. More like the sense that once she crossed this line, there would be no going back. Tom's hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone with aching tenderness. "Not yet," he whispered, though his eyes held nothing but want. "When I kiss you, I want you to be certain. No doubts. No fear that I'm taking advantage of your gratitude or your circumstances." "I'm certain now," she breathed. "You think you are." His thumb brushed her bottom lip, and she felt the tremor in his touch. "But give it time. Let me prove this is real." The restraint in his voice, the barely leashed hunger, made her ache with wanting. But there was something devastating about a man who wanted her this badly and still chose to wait. "You're making this very difficult," she said shakily. "Good." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, a crooked smile tugging at his mouth despite the heat in his gaze. "Now tell me, what's your favorite color?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "Your favorite color. And how do you take your tea?" "Blue," she said slowly, confused. "And with honey." "Why?" "Because I want to know those things before I fall completely in love with you." His smile was crooked, vulnerable. Seems like the responsible thing to do. Despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the voice in her head screaming that this would end badly, Tessa smiled. "That's your plan? Learn my tea preferences?" "That's just the start." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, her hand still resting against his chest, his fingers still tangled in her hair. But beneath the warmth spreading through her, Tessa couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he wasn't telling her. Something in the careful way he'd worded things, the shadows that crossed his face when he mentioned his injury. The days that followed developed their own rhythm. Mornings, Tom would bring her breakfast. Always something different, watching to see what she liked best. Afternoons, they'd walk the castle grounds or sit in the library, talking about everything and nothing. Evenings, they'd share dinner in his private quarters, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. And through it all, Tessa felt herself coming back to life. Not just physically, though the regular meals were transforming her body, filling out the sharp angles, bringing color back to her cheeks, but something deeper. Tom seemed to be transforming too. The tension she'd seen in him that first night gradually eased. He smiled more readily, laughed at her dry observations about court politics, and the pain lines around his eyes softened. On the 5th day, she found him in the healing ward. "I didn't know you came here," she said, watching as he checked on an elderly woman recovering from a fall. "Every day." He adjusted the woman's blankets with surprising gentleness. "My mother used to say that a king who doesn't know his people's pain can't serve them properly." Tessa watched him move through the ward, speaking to each patient, learning their names and their stories. He didn't perform it for an audience. There were no advisors here, no court members to impress. Just Tom, caring for his people because that's who he was. When he finished, she followed him to a small room where healing supplies were stored. He started to reach for a jar on a high shelf, then flinched, a tiny movement, quickly suppressed, but she saw it. "You're hurting," she said. "It's nothing." "Tom." She caught his hand. "You don't need to hide from me." He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly pulled up his sleeve. The scars were worse than she'd imagined. Black lines spider-webbed from his wrist to somewhere beneath his shirt, the tissue raised and angry even after a year. She recognized the pattern immediately, silver poisoning, the kind that should have killed him. "Oh," Tessa breathed. "Ugly, aren't they?" His voice was carefully neutral. She traced one of the lines gently, feeling him tense beneath her touch. Silver poisoning. It wasn't a question. She'd seen it before, years ago, when one of her father's workers had been caught in a raid. The man had died screaming within days. How are you still alive? Luck, and very determined healers. Tom's jaw tightened. They got most of the poison out, but not all of it. What's left? He gestured to the black veins. It doesn't go away. Tessa's throat constricted as understanding crashed over her. Silver poisoning was a death sentence for their kind. Even trace amounts could cripple a wolf's ability to heal, to shift, to access the strength that made them what they were. And Tom had survived a lethal dose. They're proof you survived, she said quietly, meeting his eyes. That you saved your people even when it nearly killed you. There's nothing ugly about that. Tom caught her hand, pressing her palm flat against the scarred skin. It goes all the way across my chest, down my side. The healers said I'm lucky the poison didn't reach my heart. Can I see? He went very still. Tessa, please. Slowly, giving her time to change her mind, Tom unbuttoned his shirt and shrugged it off. The scars were extensive. They radiated from a central point just left of his sternum, black veins spreading across his ribs, wrapping around his side, disappearing beneath the waistband of his trousers. The skin was puckered in places, smooth in others, a map of agony written on his body. Tessa stepped closer, raising her hand to touch. Tom caught her wrist, his grip, gentle, but firm. You don't have to. She waited until he released her, then placed her palm over the worst of the scarring, right above his heart. The contact sent that electric current through her again, stronger this time. Tom's eyes closed, and she heard his breath catch. Does it hurt right now? She asked quietly. No. His voice was rough. When you're close, it's like the poison goes dormant. I can breathe without pain for the first time in a year. Tessa's other hand came up to trace the scars spreading across his ribs. She felt his muscles jump beneath her touch, heard the sharp intake of breath. I'm not using you, Tom said suddenly, his eyes opening to meet hers. I need you to know that. Whatever this is between us, it would be there even if touching you didn't help. You have to believe that. I do. And she realized it was true. She'd watched him these past days, seen the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. This wasn't just about pain relief. This was something rawer, more complicated. Good. He caught her hand, the one resting over his heart, and held it there. Because I meant what I said. I'm falling in love with you, Tessa. And it's terrifying. Her throat tightened. Why is it terrifying? Because I'm broken. I have a kingdom to run and enemies who'd use you against me if they knew what you meant to me. You deserve someone whole and uncomplicated, and I'm neither of those things. He paused. And in a few more days, you're free to leave, and I don't know what I'll do if you choose to go. Tessa looked up at this man, this king who'd fed her when she was starving, who'd been gentle when she expected demands, who trusted her with his scars and his fears, and felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously like love. You're not broken, she said quietly. You're healing. There's a difference. Tom's expression cracked open, all that careful control shattering. Tessa, he kissed her before she could say anything else, one hand cupping her face, the other sliding into her hair. It wasn't gentle. It was hungry, almost reverent, like he'd been starving for this and finally had permission to take. Tessa made a soft sound against his mouth, and she felt the tremor that went through him in response. His fingers tightened in her hair, his other hand splaying across her lower back to pull her flush against him. The kiss deepened, turned consuming. She could taste the relief in it, the want he'd been holding back since the moment he caught her. Her hands slid up his bare chest, careful of the scars but not afraid of them, learning the geography of him, the heat of his skin, the way his muscles jumped beneath her touch. Tom's mouth left hers to trail along her jaw, down the column of her throat. When he found the sensitive spot behind her ear, Tessa gasped, her fingers curling against his chest. "We should stop," he said against her skin, even as his hands contradicted his words, pulling her tighter against him. "Why?" "Because I want you so badly I can barely think straight, and we're in a healing ward where anyone could walk in." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "And because when I have you, if you'll let me, it's not going to be rushed in a supply closet." The promise in his voice sent heat pooling low in her belly. "No? No. It's going to be in my bed, with all night to learn what makes you fall apart in my arms." His thumb traced her kiss-swollen bottom lip. "But first, I'm going to feed you dinner and tell you about my embarrassingly comprehensive plan to convince you to stay." Despite the desire still thrumming through her, Tessa laughed. "You have a plan?" "I'm a king. I always have a plan." "Tell me." Tom pressed a kiss to her forehead, then reluctantly stepped back and pulled his shirt on. "Over dinner, which I'm going to cook for you myself." "You cook?" "Badly. But the effort should count for something." They walked back to his quarters hand in hand, and Tessa tried not to think about how natural it felt. How right. But nothing that felt this right ever lasted in her life. Tom's cooking was, in fact, terrible. He burned the vegetables, oversalted the meat, and somehow managed to make bread that was simultaneously doughy and hard. Tessa ate every bite and loved him a little more for trying. "This is inedible," Tom said, staring at his plate with dismay. "It's perfect." "You're a terrible liar, Tessa." "I'm not lying." Tessa reached across the table to take his hand. "You're a king who just spent an hour trying to cook for me. That matters more than whether it tastes good." Tom's expression softened. "My mother used to cook. After she died, the kitchen staff wouldn't let me near the stoves. Said it wasn't proper for a king to do servants' work." "That's ridiculous." "It's tradition." He shrugged. "But I thought, if I'm asking you to stay, I should be able to give you something that isn't about what a king can provide. Something that's just me, as a man who wants to take care of you." Tessa's heart did that complicated thing again. "Tell me more about your plan." Tom settled back in his chair, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "First, I want to offer you a place here. Not as my mate, not unless you choose it, but as a healer. I saw you in the ward today. You have good instincts, and the patients responded to you. We could use someone like you. I'm not trained. You can be. Our head healer is always looking for apprentices." He paused. "It would give you purpose, income, independence. You wouldn't have to rely on me for anything." "You'd do that? Give me a way to leave?" "I'd rather give you reasons to stay by choice than trap you by necessity." His eyes met hers. "Second, I want time. Time to court you properly, to prove this isn't just about what you do for my pain. Time for you to be certain of what you want." "And third?" Tom stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Third, I want to be honest about what I'm hoping for. I want you to choose me, Tessa. Choose this. Not because I'm a king, not because I can provide security, but because when you look at me, you see someone worth loving despite the scars. Tessa's hands slid up his chest to link behind his neck. I already do. See someone worth loving? See past the scars. She pressed closer. Both kinds. Tom's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her bottom lip with such gentleness it made her chest ache. His eyes followed the movement, dark and intent, and when he finally leaned in, it was achingly slow. Their lips met soft and sweet, barely more than a whisper of contact. He kissed her like she was something fragile, something sacred. Small, tender brushes of his mouth against hers that made her heart stutter. His thumb continued its slow path along her jaw, her cheekbone, learning the geography of her face. Tessa's breath mingled with his in the small space between them, and she felt the tremor in his fingers, the way he was holding himself back. When she pressed closer, seeking more, he made a quiet sound against her mouth. The kiss deepened by degrees, unhurried and thorough. Tom kissed her like he had all the time in the world, like nothing else existed beyond this moment. His other hand slid into her hair, cradling the back of her head, and Tessa felt something in her chest crack wide open. When they finally broke apart, neither pulled back far. Their foreheads touched, breaths still mingling, and Tessa kept her eyes closed, afraid that opening them would shatter whatever this was. "Stay," he whispered. "Please stay." And Tessa, who'd spent 2 years learning to survive alone, found herself wanting to be brave enough to try living with someone else. "Ask me again in the morning," she said, "when my head is clearer and you're not kissing me senseless. Is that what I'm doing?" "You know it is." They spent the rest of the evening on the couch by the fire, Tessa tucked against his side, talking about everything. Her mother's recipes, his memories of his parents, her dreams of having a garden someday, his fears about leading a kingdom while broken. When she finally returned to her room, it was late. She climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to organize her thoughts. One more day. That had been the agreement, but she didn't want to leave. The realization settled over her with quiet certainty. Here, she had purpose. She had people who smiled when they saw her. She had Tom, who made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. Like every part of her, even the broken pieces, was worth cherishing. Fate, though, would have other plans in the form of an unexpected visitor the next morning. Tessa was in the healing ward, helping change bandages under the head healer's supervision, when a woman swept in wearing silk that probably cost more than Tessa would earn in a year. "You must be Tessa," the woman said, her smile sharp. "I'm Corinne, the king's senior advisor." Something in Tessa's gut clenched on instinct. "It's nice to meet you." "I wish I could say the same." Corinne's eyes swept over her, assessing and dismissive. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. Tessa followed her out of the ward and into an empty corridor. "I'll be direct," Corinne said. "You need to leave." "Excuse me?" "The king is fond of you. I can see that, but you're a distraction he can't afford right now." Corinne's expression was almost pitying. "Did he tell you about his injury? About how precarious his position is?" "He did." "Did he tell you that there are members of the council who would challenge him if they knew the full extent of it? That we're one major incident away from a civil war?" Corinne stepped closer. "Tom is a good king, but he's vulnerable. And you, my dear, make him more vulnerable." "I don't understand." "You're not exactly queen material, are you? A girl with no family, no fortune, no political connections. If Tom announces you as his intended, it will look like desperation, like his judgment is compromised." Corinne's voice softened. "I know you care for him. That's why you need to leave before you destroy everything he's worked for." Tessa felt ice spreading through her chest. "He asked me to stay." He's thinking with his heart instead of his head. That's what men do when they're lonely. Corinne touched Tessa's arm. But you're smarter than that, aren't you? You've survived on your own for 2 years. You know how the world works. You know that fairy tales don't come true for girls like us. Girls like us. The words cut deep because they were designed to. I should go, Tessa said, her voice hollow. It's for the best. Corinne squeezed her arm. And Tessa? Don't tell Tom I spoke to you. He'll only feel guilty, and that won't help anyone. Tessa nodded numbly and walked away on legs that felt disconnected from her body. She made it back to her room before the tears came. Great, shuddering sobs that shook her entire frame. Because Corinne was right. Of course she was right. Tessa had been an idiot to think this could work, that someone like her could fit into someone like Tom's life. She'd been playing at belonging, but she'd always known it was temporary. Always known that eventually the reality of court politics would crash back in. Just then, there was a knock on her door. Tom's voice muffled. Tessa, can I come in? She wiped her eyes, tried to compose herself. I'm not feeling well. Maybe tomorrow? A pause. Open the door, Tessa. She opened the door to find him standing there with a tray of food and an expression of such concern it nearly broke her all over again. On the tray, beside the usual bread and fruit, sat a small vase with blue winter roses and a steaming cup of tea that smelled of honey. He'd remembered all her favorite things. You've been crying, he said, setting down the tray and cupping her face. What happened? Nothing. I'm just tired. Tessa. His thumb traced the path of a tear. Don't lie to me. What happened? She wanted to tell him, wanted to pour out everything Corinne had said, let him reassure her. But the words stuck in her throat because underneath the pain was a terrible certainty. Corinne was right. I think I should leave, Tessa said instead. Tomorrow. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. Tom went very still. Why? Our 3 days are long up. It's time for me to go. That's not an answer. His hands tightened on her face. Something happened. Tell me what it was. I just realized this was a fantasy, a beautiful one, but... She stepped back, breaking contact. I don't belong here, Tom. We both know it. That's not true. I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer you except... She gestured vaguely. Whatever it is that makes your pain stop. And that's not enough to build a life on. Tom's expression shifted from concern to something harder. Who told you that? It doesn't matter. Who told you that? The command in his voice made her wolf sit up and take notice. Corinne came to see me. She said I was making you vulnerable, that I'd destroy everything you've worked for. Tom's jaw clenched so tight she heard his teeth grind. And you believed her? She was right, about all of it. She was lying. He moved closer, and Tessa saw fury radiating off him in waves. Corinne has been positioning her daughter as a potential mate for months. She sees you as a threat to her plans, so she's trying to drive you away. Even so, that doesn't make her wrong about me. Yes, it does. Tom caught her shoulders. Tessa, listen to me. You belong here because I want you here, because my people already love you, because you fit into my life better than anyone I've ever met, including the perfectly bred, politically connected women the council keeps throwing at me. Tom, I don't care about your father's debts. I care about you. The woman who came to a ball desperate enough to risk everything for a meal and somehow had the courage to stay when I asked. Who looks at my scars and sees strength. Who makes me laugh and challenges me and sees me as more than just a broken king. His hands slid up to frame her face. You understand what it means to fight for survival. That matters more than any bloodline. Don't let Corinne's poison convince you otherwise." Tessa wanted to believe him, desperately, but fear had its hooks in deep. "What if she's right about me making you vulnerable?" she whispered. "Then we'll face it together." His forehead touched hers. "I'd rather be vulnerable with you than safe without you." "You keep saying that." "Because I mean it." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Don't leave, Tessa. Don't let fear win." Tessa closed her eyes, warring with herself. Every survival instinct she'd developed screamed at her to run, to protect herself before the inevitable hurt came. But another part, the part that had been waking up over the past week, that had been learning to want things again, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was worth the risk. Tom's hand slid into her hair, his touch gentle. "I know this is overwhelming. I know trusting this goes against everything you've learned, but I'm asking you to be brave one more time." The tenderness in his voice undid her. "Okay," she breathed. "I'll stay." She opened her eyes. "But Tom, if Corinne is positioning her daughter, that means there are people who don't want me here, people who'll try to drive me out." "Then they'll fail." The absolute certainty in his voice sent shivers down her spine. "Because I'm done hiding what you mean to me. Tomorrow, I'm announcing to the council that I'm courting you with intention to bond." "That's not... You can't just..." "I can, and I will." His kiss was fierce, claiming, "You're mine, Tessa, and I'm done pretending otherwise." The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered her. Instead, it made her wolf purr with satisfaction. "And if the council objects?" she asked when he finally let her breathe. "Then they'll learn that their king doesn't need their permission to choose his mate." His hands slid into her hair. "Do you trust me?" "Yes." "Then trust that I know what I'm doing. Trust that I wouldn't put you in danger." He paused. "And trust that you're worth fighting for." Tessa kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything she couldn't say into it, the fear, the hope, the desperate want to believe this could work. When they broke apart, Tom smiled against her mouth. "Eat your dinner, then get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." "Interesting how?" "You'll see." He left her with that cryptic statement and a tray of food she had no appetite for, but she ate anyway because he'd brought it for her, and that mattered. That night, Tessa lay in bed and thought about bravery, about the different forms it took. She'd been brave when she survived her father's death, when she'd scrounged and stolen and worked herself raw, but that had been survival. This, choosing to stay, choosing to hope, choosing to believe she might deserve happiness, this was a different kind of courage entirely. She just hoped she had enough of it. The council meeting was exactly as terrifying as she'd expected. Tessa stood at Tom's side in a dress that had appeared in her wardrobe that morning, deep burgundy velvet that fit her perfectly, and tried not to fidget as 12 pairs of eyes assessed her. "You wish to address the council, Your Majesty?" An older man with iron-gray hair spoke, his tone neutral. "I did." Tom's hand found hers, their fingers linking in full view of everyone. "I want to inform you that I'm courting Tessa with intention to bond. The formal announcement will go out by week's end." The silence that followed was deafening. Corinne was the first to speak, her voice dripping with false concern. "Your Majesty, surely this is rather sudden. The girl has only been here a week." "Long enough to know what I want," Tom said evenly. "But what do we know about her?" another council member asked. "Her family, her background. You know she's brave, competent, and has already proven herself an asset to our healing ward. Tom's voice took on an edge. What more do you need to know? Her father was a gambler who died in disgrace, Corinne said, dropping the pretense of kindness. He lost everything to the tables and left her with nothing but debts. Is this really the bloodline we want bonded to our king? Tessa felt the words like physical blows. Every fear she'd had crystallized in that moment. The shame, the worthlessness, the certainty that she didn't belong. But before she could pull away, Tom's hand tightened on hers. My father was murdered, Tom said, his voice cold as winter. My mother died screaming. I was tortured with silver and nearly died myself. Should I be judged by my worst moments, or by what I've done since? That's different. It's not. He looked at each council member in turn. Tessa survived circumstances that would have destroyed weaker people. She's still standing, still kind, still willing to help others despite what she's endured. That tells me everything I need to know about her character. But Your Majesty, Corinne tried again. I wasn't asking for permission. Tom's voice dropped to something dangerous. I was informing you as a courtesy. My decision is made. The only question is whether you'll support it or stand in my way. The threat in those words was unmistakable. Tessa felt the power radiating from him, not just as a king, but as an alpha asserting his dominance. One by one, the council members lowered their eyes in submission, all except Corinne. Your Majesty, I must protest. Then protest all you want, in private, at a later time. Tom's eyes narrowed. Or perhaps we should discuss why you felt the need to approach Tessa privately yesterday and attempt to drive her away with lies? Corinne went pale. I was only trying to protect. You were trying to manipulate the situation to your advantage. I won't tolerate it. He paused, letting the words sink in. You're dismissed from this council, effective immediately. You may retain your lands and titles, but your advisory position is forfeit. The shock rippled through the room. You can't, Corinne sputtered. I just did. Tom's voice was absolute. And if I hear of you spreading rumors about Tessa or attempting to undermine our bond in any way, you'll find yourself with far more to lose than a council seat. Am I clear? Corinne's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Finally, she bowed stiffly and swept from the room, fury radiating from every line of her body. When the door closed behind her, Tom addressed the remaining council members. Does anyone else have concerns they'd like to voice? Silence. Then we're done here. He looked at Tessa. Unless you have something you'd like to say? Tessa's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear over it, but she thought about what Tom had said, that she'd survived, that her scars were proof of strength, not shame. Yes, she heard herself say. I know some of you have doubts about me. That's fine. I'll prove myself through my actions. She straightened her spine. My father made mistakes. I am not my father, and I won't apologize for surviving the consequences of his choices. The iron-haired man, the one who'd spoken first, smiled slightly. Well said, my dear. Welcome to the family. The tension broke. Other council members nodded, some grudgingly, others with genuine warmth. When they finally left the council room, Tessa's knees nearly buckled. Tom caught her, steadying her against him. You did perfectly, he murmured. I was terrified. I know, but you stood your ground anyway. He kissed her temple. I'm proud of you. They walked back to his quarters in comfortable silence. Once inside, Tom pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry you had to go through that, he said quietly. You defended me. I always will. He pulled back to look at her. But Tessa, I need you to understand something. This won't be the last time someone questions your worth. Court politics are vicious, and there will always be people looking for weaknesses. I know. And I need you to promise me something. His hands framed her face. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. Don't let them convince you you're not enough. Because you are. You're more than enough, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if I have to. Tessa's eyes burned. How are you real? I'm not sure I am sometimes. His smile was crooked. I keep expecting to wake up and find out you were a dream. She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it. Gratitude, desire, the fragile beginning of love. Tom responded in kind, his mouth moving against hers with a hunger that made her toes curl. His hands slid down her sides, pulling her flush against him, and Tessa felt the tremor in his touch. When he broke the kiss, his breathing was ragged. I want you, he said quietly, his forehead pressed to hers. But only if you're sure. Tessa's answer was to kiss him again, deeper this time, her fingers working at the buttons of his shirt. Tom made a sound low in his throat and lifted her, carrying her toward the bedroom with her legs wrapped around his waist. He set her down beside the bed with a gentleness that contradicted the heat in his eyes. His hands framed her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones as he searched her expression. Tell me if you want to stop, he murmured. I won't. Something in his expression shifted, relief and desire, and something deeper. He kissed her slowly as his hands found the laces of her dress, taking his time, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. But Tessa didn't want to stop. She helped him with the laces, then tugged his shirt free, needing to feel his skin against hers. They sank onto the bed together, a tangle of limbs and whispered words and touches that grew increasingly urgent. Tom learned her body with the same careful attention he gave everything else, finding the places that made her gasp, and the rhythm that built slow and sweet until they both shattered. Afterward, Tessa lay in Tom's arms and listened to his heartbeat slow to normal. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, occasionally brushing the burn scar on her arm. Tell me about this, he said quietly. Tessa looked down at the puckered skin, a perfect circle, like a brand. I needed money. My mother's necklace was the only valuable thing I had left. I took it to a pawnbroker, but he claimed it was fake, tried to give me a fraction of what it was worth. She paused. When I argued, he dropped it into the brazier he used to test metals, told me if I wanted it, I could reach in and get it. Tom's hand stilled on her arm. And you did. I needed the money, and it was my mother's, the last piece of her I had. She swallowed. The metal was hot enough that it melted into my skin. I still sold it, but he gave me even less because it was damaged. What was the broker's name? Something in Tom's voice made her look up. Why? Because I'm going to pay him a visit. Tom, no one hurts you and walks away unscathed. Not anymore. His arms tightened around her. That scar is proof of your strength, but it's also proof that people took advantage of your desperation, and I won't let that stand. Tessa pressed her face to his chest, overwhelmed by the protectiveness in his voice. You can't fight every battle for me. Watch me. They fell into silence, comfortable and warm. Tessa felt herself drifting, safe in a way she hadn't been in years. Tessa? Tom's voice was quiet. Yes? I love you. Her breath caught. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He tilted her chin up. I love you. I've probably loved you since you threatened to leave after 3 days, and I had to restrain myself from locking the doors. Despite everything, Tessa laughed. That's not romantic. It's honest. His thumb traced her bottom lip. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. But the words were right there, pressing against her throat, demanding release. I love you too. Tom's eyes closed, and she saw something almost like pain cross his face. Say it again. I love you. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise, and Tessa let herself believe, for the first time, that maybe this could work, that maybe she was allowed to have this. The attack came 3 days later. Tessa was in the healing ward, mixing a poultice under the head healer's supervision, when the sounds of fighting echoed from the courtyard. Stay here, the head healer ordered, moving to bar the door. But Tessa's wolf was already surging forward, responding to a pull she didn't understand. Something was wrong. Tom was in danger. She shoved past the healer and ran. The courtyard was chaos. A dozen men in unmarked leathers were fighting Tom's guards, and at the center of it all, Tom, surrounded by 4 attackers, fighting with brutal efficiency despite the hitch in his movements, despite the pain etched across his face. Tessa's wolf roared to the surface without permission, the shift happening so fast she barely registered it. One moment she was human. The next, she was on 4 legs, all instinct and fury. She launched herself at the nearest attacker, her jaws closing on his arm. He screamed, and she felt savage satisfaction as she tasted blood. Tessa, no! Tom's voice, edged with panic. Get back! But she couldn't. Her wolf had taken over, driven by the need to protect her mate. She fought like something wild, all teeth and claws and rage. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she registered surprise. She hadn't been able to shift in months, her wolf too weak from starvation to emerge. But now she was strong, well-fed, and absolutely feral. An attacker's blade sliced across her flank, silver burning through fur and flesh like liquid fire. She yelped, the sound torn from her throat, and the scent of her own blood filled the air. The sound Tom made wasn't human. He tore through his remaining opponent with savage efficiency, then his body convulsed. Bones cracked and reformed, the sound ricocheting off the courtyard walls. Tessa had never seen him shift. He'd said he couldn't, that the silver poisoning had broken that ability. But watching her bleed changed something. His wolf exploded into being, massive and terrible, easily twice her size, with fur the color of storm clouds and eyes that burned with protective fury. The scars were there, visible even through his pelt, but he moved like a creature born to kill. Together, they drove back the remaining attackers until the courtyard fell silent. Tom shifted back first, moving to Tessa's side. Easy, he murmured, his hands gentle on her fur. Easy, sweetheart. You're safe now. Tessa's wolf finally released control, and she shifted back, naked, bleeding, and shaking with adrenaline. Tom immediately stripped off his shirt and wrapped it around her. You're hurt. So are you. She could see fresh blood on his side, on his shoulder. I'll heal. He picked her up despite her protest. We need to get you to the healers. Tom, you shifted. The realization was finally hitting her. You said you couldn't shift, but you just... I know. His voice was strange. We'll talk about it later. Right now, I need to make sure you're all right. The healers fussed over both of them, cleaning wounds and applying salves. The silver burn on Tessa's flank was painful, but thankfully shallow. It would scar, but nothing worse. Tom's injuries were more concerning. The fresh wounds had reopened old ones, and she could see the black veins of silver poisoning spreading from his chest. You shouldn't have shifted, she said quietly as the healers worked. I had to. You were in danger. And now you're worse. No. Tom caught her hand. Tessa, I'm not worse. I don't know how to explain it. but I feel better than I have in a year." The head healer looked up sharply. "Your Majesty, may I examine you more closely?" Tom nodded, and the healer began checking the silver scars with experienced hands. Her expression grew increasingly confused. "This is impossible," she muttered. "What is?" "The poisoning. It's receding." She looked at Tom with wide eyes. "Your Majesty, the silver poisoning you took isn't supposed to recede. It's permanent damage. But these scars, they're lighter than they were yesterday, and the ones on your chest are almost healed." Tom looked at Tessa. "Since when?" "I started noticing changes about 3 days ago," the healer said. "Small ones at first, your color improving, your stamina increasing, but this is remarkable." 3 days ago, night Tessa had told him she loved him, the night they'd bonded in every way except the formal ceremony. "It's the mate bond," Tom said quietly. The healer was silent for a long moment, her expression shifting from confusion to something like awe. "I've read about this, in texts centuries old." She looked between them. "True mates, the rarest kind, can heal what should be permanent, but only if the bond is not just acknowledged, but completed, embraced by both parties." "Completely embraced," Tessa repeated, her throat tight. Tom's hand found hers. "She means you saved me, not by proximity or instinct, but by choice." His voice roughened. "By loving me despite the scars, by accepting all of it." Tessa felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I thought mate bonds just eased pain, not reversed damage." "Most don't. But some bonds, the rarest ones, can heal what was thought lost." The healer smiled. "You two have something special." After the healer left, Tom and Tessa lay in his bed, curled together. "Who were they?" Tessa asked. "The attackers?" "Corinne's people. We captured 2 alive. They're being questioned now." Tom's arm tightened around her. "She was trying to eliminate you." "Why?" "Because she realized what you are to me, what the bond between us means." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this. You can't predict everything." "I can try." He was silent for a moment. "Tessa, after today, the entire court knows you can fight. They saw you shift, saw you protect me. There's no going back to pretending you're just some girl I'm courting. It means we accelerate our timeline. I want to bond with you officially, publicly, before Corinne or anyone else can make another move." He stepped back, and when he returned, there was a small velvet box in his hand. Tessa's breath caught. "If you're ready," he said quietly, opening it. The ring inside was simple but stunning, a deep blue sapphire that caught the light like ocean, water, set in silver. Her favorite color, the one she'd mentioned that first night over dinner, when everything between them was still uncertain. He'd remembered. "Yes," she heard herself say, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm ready." Tom's smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Tomorrow night, then, under the full moon, just us and the pack." "That fast?" "I've waited 30 years for you." He kissed her softly, his thumb brushing over the stone on her hand. "I'm not waiting anymore." The bonding ceremony was held in the forest clearing where Tom's parents had bonded 40 years before. The pack gathered in a circle, witnesses to the ancient ritual. Tessa wore white, a simple dress that one of the pack members had insisted she borrow. Tom wore ceremonial leathers marked with his family crest. But it was the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the world, that made her breath catch. The pack elder stepped forward. "We gather to witness the bonding of our alpha king to his chosen mate. Does anyone challenge this union?" Silence. The elder smiled. Then let us begin. The ritual was older than memory. Tom and Tessa each cut their palms, pressing the wounds together. Their blood mingled, warm and binding, and the bond snapped all at once, like lightning finding ground. Tessa gasped at the force of it, at the sudden awareness of Tom in her mind, her heart, her very bones. She could feel his love, his relief, his absolute certainty that she was his and he was hers. "I feel you," she breathed. "I feel you too." Tom's voice was rough with emotion. The elder bound their hands with silk, speaking the old words. When it was done, Tom pulled Tessa close and kissed her as the pack howled their approval. And Tessa finally understood what it meant to belong. The celebration afterward was joyous, food and music and dancing under the stars. Tom never let her stray far, keeping her close with a hand at her back, her waist, her hip. "Happy?" he murmured during a rare, quiet moment. "Terrified," Tessa admitted. "But yes, happy." "Good." He spun her in a slow circle. "Because you're stuck with me now. I think I can live with that." Later, much later, they returned to his quarters. Tom locked the door and turned to face her, and the heat in his eyes made her pulse race. "Alone at last," he said. "We've been alone before. Not like this, not as mates." He crossed to her, moving with that predator's grace. "Not with the right to have you in every way I've been dreaming about." Tessa's breath hitched. "And what have you been dreaming about?" "Everything." His hands found the laces of her dress. "Taking my time with you, learning every inch of you, making you fall apart so many times you forget your own name. That's ambitious. I'm very motivated." They made love slowly, learning this new intimacy. Every touch was doubled through the bond. She felt her own pleasure and his, tangled together until they were one. When they finally collapsed together, sated and breathless, Tom pulled her close. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "None." Tessa traced the fading scars on his chest, marveling at how much lighter they'd become. "You?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "But we have time now, all the time in the world." 6 months later, Tessa stood in the healing ward, checking on a young girl who'd broken her arm. "You're doing great," she told the child, adjusting the splint. "Another week, and you'll be good as new." The girl's mother smiled gratefully. "Thank you, my lady." Tessa still wasn't entirely comfortable with the title, but she'd learned to accept it, just as she'd learned to accept the reality of being queen, of having responsibilities and power she'd never imagined. Tom found her as she was finishing her rounds, pulling her into an alcove and kissing her soundly. "I missed you," he murmured against her mouth. "I saw you at breakfast 3 hours ago." "Too long." His hand slid to her stomach. "How are you feeling?" Tessa's smile was soft. "Good. Tired, but good." The pregnancy had been a surprise. They hadn't been trying yet, but the bond had apparently had other ideas. Tom had been simultaneously thrilled and terrified when she'd told him, and in the months since, he'd become almost comically protective. "You should rest," he said now, predictably. "I'm fine. I'm not fragile." "I know, but humor me anyway." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Please?" Tessa sighed, but allowed him to lead her back to their quarters. They'd moved into the royal suite a month ago, and she still sometimes felt like she was playing pretend in someone else's life. But then Tom would kiss her, or their baby would kick against her palm, or pack members would smile and bow as she passed, and she'd remember. This was real. She'd earned this, survived for this, fought for this. They settled on the couch, Tom pulling her into his arms. "Corinne's trial is next week," he said quietly. The investigation had revealed the extent of her plotting, not just the attack on Tessa, but years of embezzlement, bribery, and manipulation. She would hang for treason, and her family's lands would be forfeit. "Are you all right?" Tom asked. "I am." She made her choices. Tessa paused. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me, despite all the complications?" "Never." His hand spread across her stomach, protective. "You and this baby are the best things that ever happened to me." "Even though I fainted at your feet?" "Especially because of that." He grinned. "It was very romantic." Tessa laughed, leaning back against him. Through the window, she could see the mountains where she'd first arrived, starving, desperate, certain she was only passing through. She'd come to the mating ball expecting nothing more than a meal. Instead, she'd found a king who saw past her scars, a pack that accepted her, and a love she'd never dared hope for. "What are you thinking?" Tom asked. "That I'm glad I fainted. Best accident of my life." They sat together as the sun set, planning for their future, the baby's nursery, the spring planting, the treaty negotiations with the Eastern Territories, all the mundane, beautiful details of a life built together. And Tessa, who'd survived on scraps and hope for so long, finally allowed herself to believe that she deserved every moment of it. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.